Hello, arts lovers, and thank you for supporting the New Jersey stage. In this exclusive interview, I had a chance to catch up with actor Ashley Blanchet. Ashley Blanchet is currently starring in the role of Maria in The Sound of Music showing at the Paper Mill Playhouse. During our conversation, I had a chance to ask her how music has had an impact in her life, what it was like mentally preparing for the role, and what it means to be the first Black woman to star as Maria in the production. Check out the full conversation here. First and foremost, thank you so much for joining me. This is a very important moment in New Jersey theater history, right? You have already had the opportunity to grace the stage of Paper Mill Playhouse, but you haven't come back since its major stage and production and lighting upgrades. So, how does that feel coming back and returning to Paper Mill Playhouse?
It feels wonderful, especially because of the pandemic, because it took us all a second to see how it was going to feel. We didn't know how long theater was going to take to come back. And the first time that I heard music live, I don't know about you, but it was a very special feeling. And ironically, that's kind of what this show is all about, you know, hearing music live and hearing it in person, and the fact that nothing can really replace that. Um, so it feels really good to be using this piece to come back officially in front of an audience. We did a couple of things at the Paper Mill Playhouse streaming, and we used cameras. And Mark Hobie, our artistic director, was very inventive in keeping the theater alive. But he really had to, be inventive and be creative to make sure that it didn't go under. So we're very, very pleased, very happy to be there now.
And we're happy to host you. I know that, like you said, the arts for me is such a transformative experience. And yes, we had the opportunity and we were fortunate enough to innovate with technology, but it's nothing like actually going into the theater and experiencing a piece live. So we're so excited to have you back at Paper Mill Playhouse. Speaking of the actual production, The Sound of Music is a historic piece, not only for people that are familiar with the film adaptation, but in theater history overall. But it contains such heavy topics. How did you mentally prepare when you were revealed to be a part of the cast?
Um, well, the first thing I did was I did not watch the movie again because I watched it so much as a kid. I was a little bit afraid that I would end up doing a lot of mimicry. And there's a certain amount of giving a nod to what's been done before, and a certain amount of like, all right, let's try to make something new here. Um, you're right. The themes in the piece are um, super adult, as much as it is for kids and a family show. And I think hopefully moving for everybody. Yeah, I think it was such a beautifully written piece, and that's why it's a classic, right? Is that we found ourselves even rehearsing the show. There's moment after moment in the show that is so touching and so beautifully written and so beautifully created. And I think it pulled on our heartstrings even in the rehearsal room more than we thought it was going to. um Especially given themes about like love and loss and family, and also, in the very end, not to give anything away, but but when they're escaping the Nazis and he's singing Edelweiss and he's saying bless my homeland forever, and he's feeling like he loves his country, but it's been changing politically around him in this sort of a sort of an evil way. I think that we in the Northeast can definitely relate to that feeling. And so I think it sort of touches in this new way for me, not in the same way that it touched me as a kid. It touches me in this sort of like, oh, this is really actually, a thing that could happen now to our country. And I think so it hits very different. But I think ultimately what I've been realizing is that it's a story about courage, the courage to love. Um, oops, the courage to love, in the face of fear. And that is a theme that happens again and again. And, she helps the captain to remember to love his children. Then she tries to go back to the Abbey because she's afraid of loving him and putting herself out there. And she has the courage to go back. And ultimately, it's love that gets them to safety. So I think it's such beautiful music, and it really touches home on all these topics in a really real way. You're right.
And I'm so glad that you were able to look at it from that perspective, because these are commonalities across cultures, across ethnicities, across countries. And especially in the political climate that we've been in the past few years, revisiting a piece like this, because it's so raw and so real to a parallel of today's climate, it can get you in that space. But to always remember that even at the core of it, love, persistence, perseverance, and strength will always get you through. There's another thing that is really important to drill home about this piece and you starring in it. Historically, the lead actress in the production, Maria, has always been played by a non-person of color. And we had the film adaptation with Julie Andrews, and then we had the original Broadway star of Mary Martin, and then even recently going up to Carrie Underwood. You stepping into this role is new, is fresh. People haven't seen it before. What was it like knowing that you were going to be making such a historical statement?
It's complicated for me because Maria Reyna was a real person, and she was a white person. And I grew up watching the movies so much, and I loved Julie Andrews as a kid, but I never imagined playing her myself. And growing up wanting to be in the arts, I think there were a lot of roles that I studied and saw and just never even had the confidence or the understanding that it could be me. Um, so I'm really hopeful that just by the fact that Mark Hobie called me and said, I want you to do this, um, I'm hopeful that that could be different for other people, that they could see this piece. Maybe somebody, a young kid, could see this piece and think, oh, maybe I could play that. Maybe I could be a part of this musical world. Because I do think you're right. I do think that the story is for everybody, and it's something that everybody can relate to, because they're just classic themes that I think are so well done. And it's such a beautiful piece that I do hope people of all different colors and backgrounds can come and see this show and feel like they're a part of the message as well. So it means a lot to me that Mark said, let's do it differently this time. And he also, which this is really cool, he actually hired a rainbow tribe of children to do it. And he didn't do that on purpose. And I think that's the important thing that I want to drive home, is that we're kind of doing this thing, this performative thing nowadays in musical theater that I've noticed, where people are saying, oh, we need a Black person, so it's going to be this role, and this role will be the Black role. And I've seen it across the board in so many musicals, where it's almost like, are you uncomfortable with people of color because you've chosen ahead of time the role that you're okay with it being the person of color? It makes it kind of feel like you're really actually uncomfortable with the idea. But what Mark did was, he was like, I want the best person for the role. And if that comes, and so he ended up with a redheaded Louisa, a Black Marta, and Indian, Asian, a whole white, a whole different bunch of children. But because he felt like they were the best children for the role. And he told me that, a few years ago, he might not have been able to even see those children because he had to cast them all to look the same. So I'm grateful that I think in some ways we're moving in the right direction. And I think with Mark Hobie, we definitely have been moving in the right direction and will continue to do so.
That's an amazing way to look at it, because even behind the scenes, me in the media space, I see it as far as like what people get to report on. But even in the art space, as you're pointing out, there's also lists and filters about who can play what role, and sometimes it needs to be broadened, and we need to escape the fixation on one particular aesthetic being fit for any type of production, because it's creative, it's the arts, you can explore in a lot of these pieces.
Yeah, I agree. And I do hope that we can get back to a place where we're saying the best person for the role, and hey, I'm not saying like ignore race. I'm not saying don't see it. Like obviously you should be conscious about it. And, if putting a person of color in this particular role is maybe harmful to the community, then maybe that's something we should think about. I don't think it should be completely colorblind without thinking about what that does to the community. Um, but that being said, I do hope that there's sort of more of an open-mindedness in terms of who can play this part and who can tell this story. And I really hope that we can move in that direction.
I love it and I'm here for it. One other thing that's intentional about the production overall and the history of the piece is the core is music and the love and the power of music. And as a performing arts school graduate and alumni, I would love to hear how or when you actually realize the power of music for yourself.
You know what? That is a perfect question for me because I'll tell you, when I was a teenager, my family moved and I spiraled into a deep, deep depression when I was about 12 or 13 years old. And I stopped I wasn't speaking as much. I stopped being able to like express emotion in a certain way. Like I wasn't really able to cry. And I was in a very, very dark place. And the only way that I was really able to express was by singing. And, I had my musical theater albums, and I would just sit in my room and I would just sing along to Rent and to Barbara Streisand and to the last 5 years. And yeah, and that was my therapy. And when I would get these panic attacks and I would put on music and it would calm me down. And it made me feel like I was back in my home and I felt safe again. And I think music really has this kind of spiritual power that we don't really even completely understand, you know, that can bring people together. It can express things without words. It can, it can change your state of being. It can bring people, back from, their state of being in an Alzheimer's way. Like, I just think that it has so much power that we don't even understand at this point. But we do know it's therapy. We do know that it's therapeutic, and I think it's what the world needs right now.
Absolutely. I'm a huge proponent of arts education, especially using it as a therapeutic method. I have a nephew who's autistic, and I've seen how music can either calm children that are autistic or older residents or citizens battling with dementia or Alzheimer's. I'm a big proponent of music as a therapeutic method. And speaking of music being therapy, this production has some of the most iconic reference musical bits and compositions we've seen across the history of music. Now, I have a two-parted question, right? First, I'll ask, what is your favorite song in the production? And then I'll ask, what's your favorite song to sing? Because you had the opportunity to sing so many iconic Rodgers and Hammerstein songs. So which one would be your absolute favorite?
Oh, that's a good one. Their spiritual music is probably my favorite. Like when I hear Kathleen every night sing Climb Every Mountain, that gets me. It makes me cry every single time. And Meg Dragulis is our musical director, and she gives it the weightiness that it deserves. Which, if she just kind of like played through it and sped through it, you would feel that difference. But what she does is she really gives it the meaning in the way that she conducts it, and it just the orchestra. Oh my gosh, it just it sounds incredible. It's so meaningful. Um, and then you listen to the lyrics and it's even more meaningful because I think that song is about have the courage to live your life. Go out there and live your life. And live it full with all of your heart. I think that's what that song means. That's what that song means to me. And I think after the pandemic, that is a message that really hits home, having the courage to take a step outside your apartment again, having the courage to go out there and take risks again, I think that really hits home. And I think that's what this piece is all about. But yeah, so that's my favorite song of the piece to hear every night. Um, to do, I don't know, it's like it's really fun to play Maria because you go from all these different styles. Like the Sound of Music, the Hills Are Loud with Sound of Music is one style, and then I Have Confidence was written just for the movie. So it definitely doesn't feel like the same. It's not like I don't think Mary Martin sang this. You can get that sense, but that's more of like a chestier place. And that's really fun because it's just a funny song because she doesn't really have confidence the whole time. um I don't know, I think it goes from song to song, of course. um Doe with You're My Favorite Things, I don't know, they're all classic songs for a reason, so I enjoy them all for different reasons. It's hard to pick just one.
Well, I look forward to hearing you sing them all, right? And then we can just bask in the joy that you have as you're singing them. So, without giving too much away about the production, because we know that Paper Mill Playhouse has undergone quite a few upgrades to its actual facility, what can people expect from the production?
Well, I'm just hoping that people can come and be touched again by what I hope will be more nostalgic and familiar than they realize. But then I hope that they will also see it in a different light, like we did when we came to this piece, and feel like it touches them in a way that's really personal and really relatable in a whole brand new way. Um, I hope that's what it does. And I think that Mark directed it in such a beautiful way. It's a really funny piece. It's a really good time. The children are so lovable. And I think everybody in the show does such an incredible job. So I think that they can trust that they'll come and hopefully feel just a little bit like warmer when they leave.
We need that right now. We're going into a lot of political seasons, and we're constantly living in a doom scroll of the news. And
Right.
we need something light to revive us from that mental space.
Yeah.
Um,
Light in a real way too, I think, like light in a way where people, it's not like, oh, bubblegummy. I think it really touches home in terms of like, oh yeah, white supremacy. Oh, you know what I mean? But there's a resilience to it, there's a love will conquer all message to it. So yeah.
so The Sound of Music is probably one of the most easily recognizable productions in theater, and the film is wildly popular. So for people that are already familiar with the movie and people that may have already seen The Sound of Music on Broadway, or for the people that haven't seen it or don't know about it, why should they come and see it when it makes a stop at Paper Mill Playhouse?
I think that Mark has done a really good job of refreshing it, of making it brand new for this period of time. I don't think they'll ever have seen a rainbow tribe of kids that are talented like this. I think it's a brand new perspective on an old classic, and it's classic for a reason. I mean, from moment to moment, it is just beautifully created. So I think that they're gonna see um, a classic piece done with refreshed perspective, and I think it's really something special. So come on by, come through.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I know that you're going to break a leg. I look forward to seeing the production in person for myself. If you all are interested in checking out The Sound of Music when it makes a stop at Paper Mill Playhouse, you have up until New Year's Day to grab tickets. For tickets, visit my.papermill.org. Thank you so much for your time, Ashley. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.